right, class, welcome back to World Literature, English 2333. We're going to start where we left off. We're going to look at our course policies and calendar, and we can see that, excuse me, last time I lectured on policies for this class. I lectured on what's going to be expected of you for this class. I lectured on the syllabus and calendar. I also got into the preface and an overview of this class, and we're going to continue with that today, class. And we're going to also finish the overview, finish kind of a historical perspective on world literature, and then we're going to jump into Jonathan Swift at the end, and I'm going to give you some study questions for you to be thinking about as once again you go through the Jonathan Swift section in our Norton Anthology of World Literature, Volume D, which we're deeply into. So let us do that, class, and then that's a good place. Okay, so to wrap up the preface, class, we want to talk about the birth of world literature, and this is on page 1015 in the preface. It's good to once again offer some illumination on this. In 1827, it tells us a provincial German writer living in a small town, Weimar, recognized that he was in the privileged position of having access not only to European literature, but also to literature from much further afield, including Persian poetry, Chinese novels, and Sanskrit drama. So once again, how lucky he was for that. The writer was Goethe, or Goethe, as people call him, Johann Wolfgang Goethe von Goethe, or Goethe. And in 1827, he coined a term to capture this new force of globalization in literature called world literature. So Goethe came up with that, right? Okay. We now include the prologue to Goethe's play Faust, which he wrote after encountering a similar prologue in the classic, once again, Sanskrit play, once again also included in this anthology, and that Sanskrit play is Shakuntala. Since 1827, excuse me, for less than 200 years, we have been living in an era of world literature. So that's where we are for the past, once again, less than 200 years. We are living in world literature. This area has brought many lost masterpieces back to life, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was rediscovered in the 19th century, and the Popol Vuh, which languished in a library until well into the 20th century. So once again, class, the discovery of and the rediscovery of antiquity. Okay, and so that continues to today, digging up, once again, maybe forgotten texts, maybe lost texts, maybe texts that weren't very well known and should have been better known. Maybe people who come into their journey towards the canon who were never even close to the canon, all right? So once again, class, we're moving into that direction. Other works of world literature weren't translated and therefore didn't begin to circulate outside their sphere of origin until the last 200 years, including the tale of Genji. With more literature becoming widely available than ever before, Goethe's version of world literature has become a reality today. So once again, it's spread further today. More discoveries are happening today. And it continues to evolve today. The Tales of Genji was this great Japanese novel that I was reading about even this summer. In presenting world literature from the dawn of writing to the early 20th century, and from oral storytelling to literary experiments of the avant-garde, the anthology that we're dealing with for this class raises the question not only of what world literature is, but also the nature of literature itself. It's fantastic, once again. And that is ongoing. What makes literature? What creates literature? Who defines literature? Okay. We can call attention to the changing nature of literature with thematic clusters on literature in the early volumes to give students and teachers access to how early writers from different cultures thought about literature. So looking at, once again, from a wide spectrum rather than, once again, a very, very narrow perspective, which continues to happen with modern literature, which over the years, certainly the broadening of the canon has happened within poetry and the expanse of poetry, the expanse of drama, the expanse of sometimes forgotten texts from places like Africa. But the changing role and nature of literature available in this anthology as a whole, right? Okay. Other texts such as the Quran or the Bible are sacred pieces of writing central to many people's religious faith, while others appreciate them primarily or exclusively as literature. So we think of the Quran. We think of the Bible. Class, when I was young, I really didn't think of the Bible at all. I mean, I did somewhat because I went to Catholic school. I had nuns and priests in the family. I thought about becoming a priest, and then I kind of blew it off because it seemed like I was raised in a really heavy, once again, Irish-American Catholic household. And then years later, in my own way, at my own time, and I was also went to 12 years of Catholic school, spent time as an altar boy. In my own time, in my own way, years later, maybe decades later, I'd come back and look to the Bible as a piece of literature. How is it as a piece of literature? Incredible. It's one of those texts that we can go back to. Not only for some people as a spiritual base or maybe a manifesto for their lives overall, the Old and the New Testament, but as a piece of literature. You know, recently I've been back into the Psalms and thinking, wow, these Psalms are very oral in their recitations, but certainly from a poetic point of view, they're very tactile. They're very percussive, almost in their rhythm and in their beats, etc., etc. The whole Bible's like that. And the condensation sometimes of stories in the Bible, we'll look at it and say, how does this work? How are they getting so much done in this story they're laying out in so long? So spiritual texts, once again, class as aspects of literature. Even if we ignore, for example, the spiritual basis, Bible's fantastic, once again, piece of literature. Are sacred pieces of writing central to many religious faiths, while others appreciate them primarily or exclusively as literature. Some texts, such as those by Lazo or Plato or Kant, belong in philosophy, while others, such as the Declaration of Independence or primarily political documents, are. Modern conception of literature as imaginative literature, as fiction, is once again very recent, about 200 years old. We have therefore opted for a much expanded conception of literature within our books we're studying this semester. That includes creation myths, wisdom literature, religious texts, philosophy, political writing, and fairy tales, in addition to poems, plays, and narrative fiction This answers to an older definition of literature as writing, once again, of high quality or of great significant cultural, once again, significance. And I think of the oral tradition, sometimes that will end up in literature. And the oral tradition of tale telling in cultures also, including like in Ireland, where the highest calling of all class in the Middle Ages and in the post-Middle Ages, during the Renaissance, during the Middle Ages, during the Renaissance, in Irish society and Celtic society was the poet, higher than the king. And the poet would study divination and study nature and study philosophy and study the world and learn how to memorize poetry. And then they would, become the highest person in the court of the kings. And then there came a time in Irish society, 1700s, 1600s, where they kicked the poets out on the streets and said, we don't need you anymore. But there was a time of that oral tradition of poetry. Say, for example, in Ireland, where the poet was held a vaulted position in society, and then that all changed. Class. This brings us to the last, perhaps most important question in what we study in the world. Why study it through literature? So why study literature at all, besides it's entering the realm of what? Possibilities, the round of culture, the realm of language, the realm of possibilities, the realm of spirit, the realm of non-spirit, the realm of expansiveness to our minds and of the human condition. Literature can be reactivated with each reading. So every time we go back, we'll see, does it stand up? Or where are we, right, in regards to literature? Reactivated the reading. I do it all the time. Sometimes I'll grab a book of, like, I consider certainly literature, like the great Spanish poet Lorca, Gabriel Garcia Lorca. I'll read him. I got a 1,000-page anthology in my other room here, where I'll read the Spanish on one side and the English on the other, and I'll go back and forth, And then, like, sometimes my students, I'll someday maybe not be up for it, or I'll say, oh man, I'm having some real challenges with Spanish today and I'm tired. But I'll go back to him and I'll read him. And, I was reading him 30 years ago, and I'll go back to reading him today and say, wow, does this stand up? Am I reading it differently? Okay. What's it saying to me now? My first gift of a book of poetry was the great French writer Verlaine, Paul Verlaine. And an old girlfriend in Los Angeles gave me his selected poems. And that book changed my life. I was 22. It was the University of California Press, the selected poems of Paul Verlaine. And I remember, wow, I thought, this is a trip. I can read some French poetry before going to sleep at night, English translations. And sometimes I go back to him and say, wow, does he still stand up for me? Or where am I reading him now? Or, wow, I like that poem. Or I go back to Rimbaud. I go back to Mallarmé. I go back to Villon, the great French poets. I, reactivated. Do they work? Sometimes some writers that I read years ago, I'll have problems finding out whether they're working for me or now, or maybe what did I see in them? I do that with avant-garde writers all the time. Avant-garde artists of literature, going back to the godfather of postmodern poetry, Charles Olson, and saying, hey, can I dig in? I was digging in 30 years ago. Let me dig in again. Or Robert Creeley, or, someone like Jimmy Santiago Baca, who's a friend of mine, Gonzalez, I haven't talked to him in years. We used to, we did gigs together out of the Black Mesa of Albuquerque. Or go back to Ray Gonzalez, the great Chicano poet who, a year and a half ago, at University of New Mexico Press, put out our book, a book we co-authored together called Cutting the Wire, Photographs and Poetry from the U.S.-Mexican Border. So I'll go back to Ray. Ray was an important piece of literature when I moved to the Southwest 26 years ago. He's a heavy writer. The other night I was looking through a book and I found a black and white photo, an actual black and white photo of the great Chicano poet who grew up in El Paso. He was a big deal, and I don't know if he's being forgotten or whatever, but Ricardo Sanchez, big deal, man. He was still alive when I moved to town in 1994. And I'll go back to Ricardo Sanchez, kind of like, old school Chicano poet from El Paso. He grew up in Segundo Barrio. And I was like, wow, man, I pulled that up and I was like, I haven't read Ricardo Sanchez in a while. But he was a big influence on me when I moved to town. Because he was kind of beat and he had rhythm and he's writing about the barrio and, he's cool. And then soon after I moved to town, he died. But he's cool. Check him out, man. Check out Ricardo Sanchez. Check out Jimmy Santiago Baca. Check out Ray Gonzalez, these people. By the end of the class, I have this list of about 100 poets to check out, modern poets, who I believe are literature. Check them out. Literature can be reactivated with each reading, and it will. The text, Swift, that you're reading now. We're going to be getting into Voltaire soon, class, and we'll be dealing most probably with Voltaire for our midterm when that comes along. And Dostoevsky and Chekhov, the great Russian writers. What a great thing that we're able to engage, class. That we can do this at the community college, And once again, as I may have shared in another lecture, I'm your professor, but more importantly, I'm a student. In Espanol, they say, este profesor, but I am este estudiante in Espanol, student. So the journey continues as professor, as a student, as a writer, as engaging, once again, reactivating literature that we're doing here and that we're digging into, and that you can spend the rest of your life, doing it. When you get out of class, my hope is at the end of the semester, the journey continues. But that's up to you, The community college, for me, got me on this track of, writing and literature and reading and all these things, journalism. Do I expect that for everybody? No. Was it good for me? Yes. Good and sometimes frustrating, painful, right? They say sometimes no pain, no gain. There's been a lot of pain involved in this, but a lot of beauty, once again. And if you dig it, go with it, continue on. What I'm doing here is opening the door for you. Class, I'm opening the door for you to these worlds. Do I have the definitive take? No. Am I a master? No. What am I? Student. Estudiante. In Espanol. And then along the way, I'm a professor too. But I need you, My students are always a very, very, very big part of the text of the class. Reactivate literature, class. But once a text has been found or reconstructed, it can be experienced as for the first time by new readers. So once again, when we dig in for the first time, when we dig in for the second time, maybe we haven't dug in at all, that's all right, I'll never forget that. People get obsessed with time. Sometimes they'll be, I talk to students, oh, Mr. Welsh, I should be further along. I'm 19. Mr. Welsh, I'm further along. I'm 25. Mr. Welsh, I should have done this, but a lot of my friends are graduating. Forget about all of that. That's all I can tell you. I mean, what I've learned, forget about that. You be you. I started college at the age of 23. I was actually 22, but I turned 23 that semester that I started my community college. It was the best thing I could have ever done waited, because at 18, I wasn't ready. This is me. A lot of you are ready. I wasn't ready. At 19, I wasn't ready. At 20, you couldn't have chained me to a seat in the college. I'd have taken that seat and smashed it out a window. I'm like, I'm not ready, man. My head isn't ready for this. But then after getting beat up from working manual labor jobs after high school and wrecking my back on a graveyard stock crew at a supermarket, and then I went to school and I was like, wow, this is kind of interesting. My professors are interesting. I'm not in the hot sun. I'm in an air-conditioned class. There's girls here, young women and young men. And we're hanging, and we're excited, and we're learning things, and I'm ready to work. So, my hope for you is that you're ready. And then if you're ready, you do it. You do it, and nobody will stop you, not even yourself. But class, it's all good, or maybe, you're ready now. Maybe you're ready next semester. I don't know. Maybe you're never ready. That's the beautiful thing about college. If you're never ready, you don't have to go. If you don't dig it. If it's torture, don't do it. I mean, it's a certain amount of pain also in college, but there's a lot to be gained from it. All right, class. Fantastic. I'm glad you're here. English 2333, world literature. Language shapes our thinking in literature. The highest expression of language plays an important role in the process, pushing the boundaries of what we can think and how we think it. This is especially true with great, complex, and contradictory works that allow us to explore different narrative perspectives and different points of view. So yes, how do we stay open to different perspectives, different points of view, different languages, to let these things in to influence us, so what we can become. We can always become ourselves, but we become more than ourselves. We learn, we become educated. It helps us too, these narratives we read, with our own rap, with our own talk, with how we present ourselves to the world once again. Class. World literature is never neutral. We know its relevance precisely by the controversies it inspires. So yeah, world literature can be controversial. World literature can be involved in politics. World literature can be involved in fighting, which is sometimes, what happens in the world of literature. Somebody may say, that isn't literature. And someone else would say, it is literature. And someone say, no, that's illiterate. And someone says, this is. And someone says, you can't come in. And then someone says, you can come in. It's fascinating. It goes on in modern literature. It goes on in modern writing and modern publishing. Who gets in, who doesn't, right? And it changes all the time. Class. Literature is capable of something much more extraordinary than, once again, science and ordinary life. It allows us to glimpse into the imaginative lives, the thoughts and feelings of humans from thousands of years ago, or living halfway around the world, right? What can we learn from Spain, España? What can we learn from Africa? What can we learn from Ireland? What can we learn from Mexico? What can we learn, from the Middle East? What can we learn from Alaska? What can we learn from, once again, New Zealand and Australia? What can we learn from Costa Rica? What can we learn from Paraguay and Lima? Peru and Bolivia and Brazil. What can we learn from Egypt? A lot. A lot. There's always something to be learning. This is the true magic of world literature, is captured in this anthology and, once again, class, our shared human inheritance. So that's the journey we're on. That's the journey we are taking this semester. Very good. So, the first thing in here that we talked about, in addition to, now that we've had that overview of world literature and what we are and where we're going, the beautiful thing about college is, see, when you get into, say, being a doctorate student or a master's student, you could spend a whole semester just dealing with an overview and background of what we've just kind of gone through in a cursory way, world literature. But since we have a lot to cover this semester, we're going to move on. But that's a beautiful thing about study. Say sometimes someone's getting a doctorate degree at Yale, they may get it in Swift, okay, and dedicate their study to Swift, or dedicate their study to some other writer or poet, or some segment of time, maybe Voltaire. My wife, who's a professor at the community college, wrote her master thesis on Chekhov, who we're going to be reading after spring break. My wife got very into Dostoevsky, the great Russian writer, but she did her whole master's on Chekhov, the great Russian writer, and one of his plays, and a treatment of her plays. And my wife is a brilliant mind, and a fantastic writer, really deep thinker. And the good thing is she's a professor at the community college, Lisa McNeil, and so she's dug in to it. Let's talk a little bit about Swift here, this introduction. Jonathan Swift was such a thoroughgoing satirist that his definition of the genre was itself satirical. So he's dealing in humor, he's poking fun at things. And he lived, we can think of it in a historical context, from 1667 to 1745. So, one of the beautiful things I always like to do is, in college I do, think about, once again, what was going on in the world at this time. Think about what's happening in America as best as you can. It's a long time ago, but we think about what's happening. When we think about 1667 to 1745, we think about what was happening in England. What was happening, because that's, his milieu, England and Ireland. What was going on, once again. Think of, there was a lot of, once again, the Industrial Revolution would be coming. Aspects of it were there. A lot of poverty. A lot of, there were no unions. There were no protection for workers. It's kind of a brutal time. Jonathan Swift would make fun of society. He wrote, is a sort of satire, is a sort of glass wherein beholders do generally discover everybody's face but their own, which is the chief reason for that kind of reception it meets in the world, and that so very few are offended with it. He was not wrong. His own brilliant, often bitter, satirical writings were immensely popular in his own time and have remained so for centuries, despite the fact that he pokes fun at all of us in some way or other, mocking us, people's political ambitions, their religious convictions, scientific knowledge, war, power, lust, vanity, and greed. All these things that we're still dealing with today, without question. we're still dealing with today. Once again, as we see politics, we see ambition, we see religious convictions, all these things, scientific knowledge, war, power, lust, vanity, and greed, right? We're coming out of time right now in American politics, American history, all these things are as important in America as they ever were. Once again, as we come into this time of change, of constant change, and how things, how the pendulum swings. Class, how times change, how they remain the same, how what men and women and the human condition are after throughout life, throughout antiquity. A lot of times the basics remain. His derisive wit, in fact, he was funny, takes in so much of the world that readers have had trouble figuring out whether he held any affirmative beliefs or values at all. But for Swift, that may not have been the point. What he said he most wanted to was to vex his readers with an uncomfortable awareness of the follies of the world. So once again, to trick his readers, to make them a little bit confused about the uncomfortable awareness of the follies of the world. The uncomfortable awareness of the follies, which are still going on. Maybe even more so now, once again. Can we look at the world and make fun of it? We have to. Once again, we're coming out of time in our own country where people around the world and other people looked at us and say, wow, America's going through it again. Going through what? Change. So much. Certainly a pandemic, which we're all trying to survive. Class. Very good. Life. Jonathan Swift. Early in the 17th century, the English monarchy had seized great parcels of Irish land and sold them to loyal English families. So here's the historical context. Those wealthy and powerful families were Protestants, and they struggled to prevent the Catholic majority from gaining power in Ireland. They officially barred Catholics from holding public office, joining the military, and teaching children. Jonathan Swift belonged to the small Protestant minority born to English parents in 1667 in Dublin, Ireland. His lawyer father died before he was born. His mother moved to England when he was a small child. Okay, he was raised by a cold and unsympathetic uncle in Ireland who had him educated at Trinity College, once again. And Swift was a rebellious student. He was punished more than once for failing to attend religious services and carousing in the city. During a Catholic uprising in 1688, he left for England and went to work for a powerful aristocrat and statesman named William Temple. There he made contact with influential writers and politicians, and he tutored a young girl named Esther Johnson, whom he nicknamed Stella. Okay, and he became as a teacher and a mentor. So that's a little bit of background about him, and this is on 282 in our text. So, as a heavy man, Jonathan Swift. And then class after that, on 286, what's happening is what you're moving right into is a reading of Gulliver's Travels, which is a wonderful, wonderful satire. Now, what I've done before when teaching in this class is if we were in class, I don't do this for a lot of classes, but I would have the students read this, parts of it out loud, with me participating. Usually it's a pretty small class participating in the reading of Gulliver's Travels, but this is the first time I've taught this class during the pandemic. And class, certainly the first time I have taught this class online. So we're not going to do that. But, I want you to spend some time reading Gulliver's Travels that we have in here, both silently, this is my annotated copy here, and once again out loud to yourself. Out loud to yourself. And read on, once again, chapter 3, we keep going. Once again, to all of the section in here on Gulliver's Travels, once again. It's a fantastic piece of writing, okay? And so we got a little bit of overview on Swift, and we see that it ends on, we're just into Pope. Yeah, it ends on pages 337. Once again, that selection that we need you to read for us, once again. And then it ends with the incredible section, A Modest Proposal, okay? And I studied, which was written in the year 1729, such an incredible essay that when I was an undergraduate at the university in junior year in California State University at Long Beach, my junior year of journalism school, we studied A Modest Proposal on 332 and took it apart for a wonderful selected journalism class I was in, junior or senior year. Larry Myers was the teacher. Wow, I remember his name. He's really great. All right, so there we are, class. Now, what I want to do for you is give you some questions in regards to just 5 questions in regards to Gulliver's Travel. Okay, so I want you, this is what I would do in class. I'd have you take these down orally. So I'm going to have you take these questions down right now. Question number 1, you get out a pen and paper. You can write this down. Question number 1 to think about in regards to Gulliver's Travels. What is significant about the faults Gulliver's Hunneman master finds with Gulliver's physical condition in Gulliver's Travels, Part 4, Chapter 4? Okay, it's question number 1. You want to ask yourself, what is significant about the faults Gulliver's Hunneman master finds with Gulliver's physical condition in Gulliver's Travels, Part 4, Chapter 4, question mark? Okay, so if you need to go back and hear this another time, you can go back. That's question number 1. Question number 2. The question is, how does Gulliver feel about war based on his comments in Gulliver's Travels, Part 4, Chapter 5? So, how does Gulliver feel about war based on his comments in Gulliver's Travels, Part 4, Chapter 5? So think about that as you're reading through. Good study question. How does Gulliver feel about war based on his comments in Gulliver's Travels, Part 4, Chapter 5? Only 5 questions I have for you. Three, how does Gulliver feel about the justice system based on his comments in Gulliver's Travels, Part 4, Chapter 5? How does Gulliver feel about the justice system based on his comments in Gulliver's Travels, Part 4, Chapter 5. All right. How does Gulliver, question 3, feel about the justice system based on his comments in Gulliver's Travels, Part 4, Chapter 5? Very good. Now, and then actually, this is going to be the last question. So, 4 questions for you, class. Okay. Oh, also, I'm sorry, under the last question, how does Gulliver feel about the justice system based on his comments in Gulliver's Travels, Part 1, Chapter 5? I have an addendum to that. How true is this, once again? And do you see aspects of it in your answer being true now? Being true now. Very good. And then, once again, the final question for you. In Gulliver's Travels, Part 4, Chapter 6, how does Gulliver present wealth as an overarching evil in society? So, one of the things that society still deals with is the accumulation of wealth and the non-accumulation of wealth in certainly American society and world society. Questions then, questions now. Questions then, questions now. Wealth and poverty. Class. Let me ask that question. In Gulliver's Travels, Part 4, Chapter 6, how does Gulliver present wealth as an overarching evil in society? As an overarching evil, once again, in society. In Gulliver's Travels, Part 4, Chapter 6, how does Gulliver present wealth as an overarching evil in society? So, class, those questions will guide you and continue to guide you as you work through, once again, Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's Travels. And you make your journey with, once again, Jonathan Swift in our Norton Anthology of World Literature, Volume D. And once again, class, what an incredible thing that we get to do this and that we are here to do this, to dig in. So with that said, once again, continue your studies, continue your work, continue reading in, think about these questions, and when you answer them, class, just get out, a side sheet of paper. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. I'm not going to put these up. And then class, once again, put down your answers. Nail down your answers to the questions however you want. A lot of times you could do it. You can type them out, class, but also you can write them out, and the journey once again continues as you dig in. This is actually, for me, this just came in the mail yesterday, and I'm really happy to get it. New journal. So once again, when I am rereading Gulliver's Travels, when I'm rereading literature, I'm digging in like you, because I'm the student, and I'm writing, and I'm taking notes, and I'm working on new books, and I'm working on new manuscripts, and I'm facing pain, and I'm getting rejected, and I'm getting accepted, and and the journey continues. The journal, the pen however you want to do it. Get those questions down, engage the text, highlight the text, write the text. It's a new pen that just came in yesterday. This isn't a fancy one, but it's pretty nice for some very wide breadth writing classes. The TWSBI 580 Diamond with a stub nib, and I've got some new shimmer ink in there that if you shake the ink, once again, you'll get some like shimmer on the page. So you don't have to do anything with fancy inks and papers as you're a student, but one of the things I want to throw out to you as you continue your academic career, and some of you are writers and will write, think about in the days ahead as you write and you work in journals or answering questions, think about too, what tools you use, what tools you use. Sometimes if you have, decent paper and pens, you pay attention, that opens up a whole world into itself. Once again, this is Claire de Fawn, once again, paper from Paris, France. They say it's most probably the best quality for certainly writing with a fountain pen. It's good. Is it the only one? No. But it's, once again, the tools of the trade. It's a Rhodia journal out of France. And this is a Pen Lux out of Taiwan with British ink in it, Diamond Ultra Green ink. So it's something to think about. It helps. Sometimes a person may even want to take more notes if they have better tools. But however you want to do it, class. I'm trying to open up these the worlds to you that are important, that may help you along, or heck, anything. It's all good. It all helps us, to dig in. Words on the page, etc., etc. Words, answering questions about literature, digging in to the Norton Anthology, once again, of world literature. Class. Very good. So with that said, what I'm going to do is I'll leave you and I'll be posting a new lecture. Good luck, good luck, good luck with Swift, as the Irish say. And I hope you stay safe. I hope you stay well. I'm glad you're here with me at the El Paso Community College. And class, I hope you have a great weekend, okay? And you and your family are well. All the best now. Good luck, good luck, good luck.